Today on test we're trying out the ST1, a tank I don't have unlocked because I skipped it to get the IS-4 while the on-track event was still on. Actually no, sorry, I'm wrong, I'm an idiot. I already had an IS-4, that's right. I already had the IS-4 unlocked because I had the IS-7 back from the olden days, before the IS-8 was introduced to the game. At least I think so. And so I was grinding the KV4 to try and get one of these, because I kind of wanted one. I'm always happy to get more tier 9s, and this thing seems pretty interesting. Now, the problem is, the KV4, my KV4 specifically, is cursed, and even in a platoon I was finding it impossible to win games. I was able to, do my part, but my team would just fold around me. And so I haven't got this thing yet. I just played on test to get used to it before I actually get it on the live server, which will happen eventually, probably in 6 months or so. Here I make a very poor life choice. This would normally get me killed, but thankfully the enemy team is mostly light tanks, and mostly not paying attention to me. The ST1 is an interesting tank. It's very heavily armoured. Its turret is ridiculously difficult to penetrate from anywhere, including behind. Its hull from in front, and even to a degree from the sides, is very tough. It's not quite what the tier 9 IS-4 was, but it's still pretty strong. They're really, really annoying to deal with. The problem is, it doesn't handle the M62 very well, so it's got quite bad bloom on both gun and track rotation, which makes it difficult to really put out a lot of damage with unless you get up in people's faces. Now, getting up in people's faces may sound like a fairly legit plan in a tank with this much armor, but a lot of the time people will just shoot gold at you, or Artie will be looking at you, or some other thing will conspire to make you die horribly. So in the sort of general world of tanks meta, where, at least on the NA server, where you tend to want to engage from mid-range and be mobile rather than heavily armoured, the IS-8 is a much better option, particularly because it seems to handle the M62 a little better. However, the ST1 is still a lot of fun to actually play and be successful in. They are incredibly, just infuriatingly difficult for the enemy team to deal with, so you know you're making somebody somewhere cry. And it's not a bad looking tank. In addition to that, there's always the faint hope that in the future we might see the actual ST2, which was what this tank was sort of put in game in place of. The ST2 is the same tank, but with two 122mm guns in the turret instead of one 122mm gun. That's why the turret's so big, in case you were wondering. The ST1 also breaks with Soviet tank design philosophy in World of Tanks by having not only a strong turret, which most of them do have, but being tall and having a lot of gun depression. It's more or less a Soviet answer to the American heavy tanks, but unlike the American heavy tanks, it does actually have hull armor. In fact, it has quite a lot of it, as you can see here. This Wheezy could have easily one-shot me by now, but he just can't get the hits in. Finally, I do go down to a T-54 Light, which flanks around the back of me, but not before I'm able to clean up 4 tanks and do a pretty decent amount of damage. This isn't really an example of great gameplay in the ST1. In fact, it was pretty reckless, especially pushing into that Lorraine like I did. It does show, though, just how much shit this tank can stand up to. It also does demonstrate, to a degree, the gun handling. If you compare it to some of my videos in the IS-8, I think I was using I know I was using 100% crew in this match. I just can't remember if it was a highly skilled crew that I pulled from another tank or not. But in either case, you can see that the IS-8 just is a much better feeling tank to drive. As we wait for the last guy to get cleaned up here, I'm actually going to go ahead and say something about the Walker Bulldog, which is, I don't think I've recorded it yet. I have a horrific short-term memory, but I did have a match where I used the autoloader and I was actually able to put out a fairly significant amount of damage, considering the fact I was lagging horribly. I had ridiculously bad packet loss and high ping, but I was able to put out a lot of damage. I was using the autoloader. Despite that, I'm going to go ahead and reaffirm my initial suspicions that the autoloader is in fact not the better gun on that tank, and honestly you should stick with just the conventional top gun. The reason for this is a light tank can't afford to be caught on reload for 30 seconds. The French tanks, the French lights, get an exemption because they hit hard enough that it actually validates that. The T-71, its reload isn't even that long, so it doesn't really count. The problem with the M41 autoloader is you do get 10 shots, which is quite a lot, but you also have that long reload. And so you get, maybe not, you know, super Unicum level players, but certainly I was getting drawn into engagements where I'd run out of shells partway through because I'd already fired off, you know, 4, 5, 6 shots at something else and thought, oh, I can go and engage this guy. I've still got 4 or 5 shots left. But because it's a low alpha gun, and because they don't always pen, sometimes those 4 or 5 shots may not be enough. You may only get 2 or 3 effective hits in, or it just might not add up to the hit points that the enemy tank has. And that's when you find yourself with a very angry enemy tank looking directly at you and yourself unable to fire back for the next 30 seconds. So I would honestly say that the autoloader isn't worth it. I would stick with the conventional gun. I just think that the ability to put down constant damage and defend yourself at any point is a lot more valuable than being able to rapidly fire 10 shots and then spend the next 30 seconds hoping nobody comes after you. Anyway, thank you for watching the video, and there are more 9.3 test preview videos. If you haven't watched them, go check them out. If you have watched them, then don't worry, there's more coming. And hope you have a good time playing this game, and I will catch you later.